The New York Metropolitans are in first place in the National League East. They've won each of their first two series. They went into that crucial rubber match game against the Phillies, and Max Scherzer went out there and did a great job to keep his team in the game. Didn't have his best stuff starting out, but found a way. Pete Alonso drove in 5 runs, another outpouring from this Mets offense. And you look up through a week of play, essentially, the Mets are 5-2 ahead of every other team in this division. I know there was a couple of games that slipped away, but if you really look at the full picture, this team has looked great in the early season. On today's show, in the first segment, I want to talk about Max Scherzer and just the type of big game pitcher he can be for this team. Later on, I will discuss what we saw out of Pete Alonso from the DH spot. Should he remain there moving forward? And then finally, I will go through some trends that we like and some trends we don't like in the early goings of the season. We're going to cover all of that on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, I just want to spend a moment here to acknowledge the brilliance of a Max Scherzer. We have seen this play out on the other side of things for years. You go into a game in the first inning, Scherzer doesn't have it. And as a fan of an opposing team, you are just in awe of what you're beholding. And you watch Scherzer walk a batter or he hits a batter and there's some runners on and you're just hoping you can get to him, get the big hit. And your team doesn't get the big hit. And Max Scherzer escapes. And you're like, all right, well, that sucked, but at least he threw 30 pitches in the first inning. So we won't see him much longer in this game. And then you look up and Scherzer's still on the mound in the 7th inning. And that didn't happen in this game, but it was one of those starts that was trending in that direction. And sure, the pitch count got to a point that he only gave the Mets 5, but he did the most important thing for this team. When that bullpen was taxed right now, you didn't have Trevor May available. You didn't have Drew Smith available. You didn't know exactly what you were going to get from some of these guys that have been struggling. To get through that top of the lineup 3 times was critical. Sure, you would have loved the Scherzer face the whole lineup 3 times through. But to get through that front 4 that is so dangerous, Kyle Schwarber, who, by the way, went 0 for 12 with, I believe, 7 strikeouts, if I'm not mistaken, against this Mets team in this series, a far cry from what he did last year. When you have JT Realmuto, Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos, as we've discussed, that's a great top of the lineup. For Max Scherzer to get through that group 3 times, it's really impressive. But it started in a first inning where, again, if you were a Phillies fan, you were really excited with how things were trending because he walks Kyle Schwarber, he got JT Realmuto to fly out, he walks Bryce Harper and Nick Castellanos. It is rare that Scherzer will even walk through batters an entire start, much less in 1 inning. And there's pitchers out there that will crumble under that pressure. But a great pitcher, a Hall of Fame pitcher like a Scherzer, like a Jacob deGrom, finds a way. And also, I think sometimes a pitcher like that, we even saw Zach Wheeler do that the night before. Sometimes these really good pitchers don't have it going early. They're just not quite commanding their pitches the way they like. And they're facing that top of the lineup, and they know they can buckle down and get the out. So for Scherzer, I do think part of those walks early on was the fact that he just wasn't comfortable and he wasn't trying to hang a pitch to a Harper or a Castellanos. He would rather put them on and find his way through a Gene Segura, which he did, getting a huge strikeout. And Segura has really good numbers in his career against Scherzer, but in that spot, bases loaded, nowhere to put him, found a way to get him out. Then he gets Didi Gregorius to ground out and escapes that jam. And again, you look up, all of that traffic, all those pitches, no runs. 29 pitches what he threw in that first inning. He had a 16 pitch second inning, really just carved up the bottom of the order with a couple strikeouts. Needed 13 pitches to work through that top of the order again, getting another strikeout on JT Realmuto and getting through that Schwarber, Realmuto, Harper part of the lineup. And that was when I thought he might go 7 because suddenly he's at 58 pitches through 3 innings. And like I said, I've seen that start play out where, again, you look up and Scherzer pitching in the 7th. You're like, what is happening? And maybe later in the season, he would have got through 6. But to get through 5 was an accomplishment in this start because in the 4th inning, another really laborious effort to get through that. He gives up a double to Nick Castellanos, who was first pitch hunting. Then Gene Segura got a base hit, and suddenly you had 2 runners on in scoring position, nobody out. What does Scherzer do? Buckles down again, gets a pair of strikeouts, nearly escapes the jam. Bryson Stott came up with a 2-2 count, really close to getting that last strikeout to escape it. And Stott, the rookie, does a great job reaching down and getting a 96-mile-per-hour fastball and dumping it into the outfield to score a run. Scherzer was pissed, which you love to see. You love that Bulldog's now in blue and orange. And he almost got out of it. He really did. Lindor, if he was a foot taller, a little more on his vertical, maybe he leaps up and catches it. Just goes right over his glove. But the Mets were still able to get through that inning because of Scherzer. He's able to get the next batter out, keep them in the game. In the 5th inning, he goes back out there to face the top of the lineup. He strikes out Schwarber, gave up a hit to Realmuto, but gets Harper and Castellanos out, and that finishes off his day. So 5 innings for Max Scherzer, 5 hits, walked 3, all in that 1st inning, 7 strikeouts, and the 1 run allowed. We were so concerned, right? Mets fans all worried when Jacob deGrom went down, and rightfully so. It's really frustrating what's going on with deGrom. But there's a reason you pay $130 million to get a Max Scherzer. Because now when you have that ace in the room that can command the room that way, it allows a Chris Bassett, a Tyler McGill, a Carlos Carrasco, all of them to maybe be a little more comfortable if they don't have to fill the shoes of a DeGrom because you have a guy that's doing that. And I'm not saying that Tyler McGill, if there wasn't a Scherzer, would have given up 4 runs in his first 2 starts this season. That's not what I'm saying. But I just do think that having the guy with the stature of Scherzer that can be a big game pitcher for you, that in a spot here where you are looking to win a series, he's the guy that can go out and the team can play behind him. And Max Scherzer, even with the runs he's given up, he hasn't been as sharp as a Tyler McGill. He's won 2 games for this Mets team. And that's the bottom line. He is a winner, and he is affecting this team in a lot of ways. That Mets starting rotation, 35 innings pitched, 18 hits, 5 earned runs, 5 walks, 35 strikeouts, a 1.29 ERA from that Mets team. And to think about this start in particular, as I mentioned, with the stakes of it, if you lose this game, what's the narrative around the Mets? And this is part of the frustration that I have with how we react to an MLB season, how we point the fingers, how we hyperanalyze games. And look, I'm doing it here on Locked On Mets, so don't get me wrong. I get the nature of it. But at the same time, if the Mets lose this game, everyone is jumping off the bridge. Everyone's letting go of the rope. The Mets would have had a 4-3 start. They didn't complete the sweep against the Nationals. They're a bad team. They won 3 of them. We can't take anything from those wins, and they lost their series to the Phillies. Now, you won 2 series, you look up 5-2 record. It's just funny how baseball works like that. But this was huge. It was huge to get off on this good start. They now play the Diamondbacks. They play the Diamondbacks, I think, in 2. I think it's Diamondbacks, Giants, Diamondbacks, Cardinals. And then they have a big slate of NL East competition. So now you can take a step away from the NL East for a little bit, which I always think is good. There's less pressure when you aren't playing your division. The Mets will return home now, and will actually not return home. They will begin their first homestand, and that's going to be really nice to see. When it comes to the other pitching, just to recap how the bullpen looked in this game, Sean Reed-Foley comes out to do mop-up duty, and the only thing he did well was get a little bit of retaliation back at the Phillies, who have been hitting a ton of Mets batters, just like the Nationals did, by hitting Gene Segura. But I kind of wish they threw him out of the game because he wasn't great actually trying to get batters out. Only got 2 outs, gave up 2 runs. Joely Rodriguez prevented him from giving up more, getting a big strikeout against Kyle Schwarber. But he goes back out, walks 2 batters, and then those 2 runs come in when Adam Ottavino is on the mound, but credited to Joely Rodriguez. The one thing I'll say about that, just if anyone wants to nitpick that managerial decision, I would have done the same thing. I'll own it. I would have wanted Rodriguez to face Harper. So you deal with the fact that he might have to face Real Muto. You would have been okay that he walked them, but then he walked Harper, and that is what you can't have. Rodriguez so far has been the worst pitcher in this Mets bullpen, but it's early, so let's not overreact too much. As I mentioned, Ottavino came in to stop the bleeding for Rodriguez, although he did give up those inherited runs. Seth Lugo came in, pitched a clean eighth inning with 2 strikeouts, and then Edwin Diaz came on for the ninth. He did give up a home run to Bryce Harper, no shame in that, but ultimately closed the door. The Mets end up winning that game. It was a 9-6, and they, like I said, move up to 5-2 and are in first place in the National League East. Offensively, it was a big day from this Mets team. I want to talk about that next, but really focus in on Pete Alonso, who is looking damn good as a DH. Should the Mets keep him there? We will discuss that in a minute, but first I want to tell you about the best tasting protein bars ever, which of course are Built Bars. Built Bars come low in calories, low in sugar. They are low in fat, but they're high in protein and high in fiber. They come covered in that 100% real chocolate, so they will cure that sweet tooth. Whether you want to eat a Built Bar as breakfast in the morning, I like to do that sometimes. Eat them after a workout's great, or at the end of the day for a dessert. You can have a Built Bar at any time, and there's so many different amazing flavors. You can mix up what you're eating. They also have the Built Bar Puffs, the first ever protein-infused marshmallows with flavors like the cinnamon churro, the banana cream pie, the coconut, marshmallow. Just great flavors of the puffs as well as the Built Bars. If you want to try Built Bar today, go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15. You're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. So when it came to the Mets offense, they saved their best for last in this series against the Phillies, scoring 9 runs in this game. Brandon Nimmo got things going early, hit his second home run in as many days, grabbed the team lead, which Pete Alonso would not let him have for long, although they're sharing it for now. In the 4th inning, Starling Marte got a base hit, and Pete Alonso drove him in with a double, first of 5 RBIs for Pete. And in that spot, it just struck me that there's a host of Locked On Mets that had talked about why Pete Alonso would lead a league in RBIs. And it was because of plays just like that. Because now that you have Starling Marte and Brandon Nimmo as well in front of Pete Alonso, there's just always traffic. And when that traffic has speed like Nimmo and Marte, you're able to get a bunch of extra RBIs. I honestly think that Starling Marte adds at least 10 RBIs to Pete Alonso's total. I just think so, because that's a spot there where it's a double that maybe only Starling Marte scores on. I mean, it's not like there is a ton of room in that left field corner. It's not like that left field is really deep in that bandbox. Castellanos, of course, helped trying to dig it out there. But, I mean, Starling Marte just so quick to go first to home on that. Just a great read on it. So that was a really good thing to see. Aaron Nola was wild in this game. Didn't look good, which I guess is good for the Mets if he continues to pitch the way he has, because he has struggled in the early goings. He walked a batter, hit 2. The Mets scored another run that way, and then Tomas Nido grounded into a double play. In the 5th inning, you had Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso both double, so that scored a run, another RBI for Pete Alonso. In the 6th, Starling Marte got a 2-out hit with runners in scoring position that drove in a run. There was still 2 runners on when Pete Alonso comes up in that inning, and then he puts the death nail in the Phillies by hitting a 3-run bomb. Like I said, 5 RBIs from Pete Alonso, 3 different RBI hits. And that's what you love. This Mets team is just picking each other up. They are functioning as a lineup, which we did not see at all last year. So that was really positive. They scored runs in 4 consecutive innings. That's another thing we didn't see a lot last year with the Mets. Just put up some crooked numbers, just score some runs, be consistent, find a way to get on the board. And they did that in this game. They also tacked on an insurance run in the 9th. Eduardo Escobar nearly hit a home run. A fan tried to help him out, trying to catch it. The poor kid almost lost his glove, but it looked like they gave it back to him. Eduardo Escobar was rewarded a triple because he would have made it to 3rd anyway. And then Dominic Smith got an RBI by driving him in with a sacrifice fly. With all that said, Pete Alonso now has 9 RBIs as a DH. He has 2 home runs as a DH and 2 starts as a DH. As a first baseman, he only has a sacrifice fly, no home runs. So that leads me to ask the question, should Pete Alonso be this team's primary DH? No. I am not moving off my opinion that he should be the starting first baseman. I know that Dominic Smith, if you needed to get 3 outs at the end of a game, and I need to put a first baseman out there, I'm putting Dominic Smith out there. I'm not blind. I know that Dominic Smith is a smoother first baseman. Here's my thing. You have no future attached to Dominic Smith. And I do not want Pete Alonso to take any step back defensively because I believe that the Mets now have two above average defensive first basemen because I think Pete is still that. And when you look at the minor leagues right now and you have Francisco Alvarez tearing the cover off the ball, his OPS is almost 2,000. I mean, the guy is insane in double a 20-year-old catcher. If he comes up this year, which I thought was not possible at all, and on tomorrow's show, we're going to do a farm report, so we're going to talk all about it. But if he were to come up this year, it would be because the bat is so good it's undeniable, right? The glove still has to catch up. So there's a chance that the Mets are just looking up in August and they're just like, man, this kid, we just got to get him up here. And you could go into the playoffs with Francisco Alvarez as your primary DH. You also have Mark Vientos, who has gotten off to a slow start, but he did last year as well. I'm not worried about it. We saw last season he's basically big league ready. I believe he is. So I could see him up at some point be the primary DH. So with all these different young guys who might need DH at bats in the future, and they're more tied to your future than Dominic Smith, I don't want to set up the situation where Dom's the first baseman, Pete's the DH, because next year I think there's a pretty good chance Dom's not on the team. And I want Pete to still be a really good defensive first baseman. Also, if you get into the playoffs with one of those young guys as your DH or anybody else for that matter, and Pete needs to play first base, you just want it to be as sharp as possible out there. And the one other thing that I think could happen if they start going to Pete at DH a little bit too much, and it's not, if it's one start a week, that's perfect. I'm fine with that for sure. Get him off his feet. You want to keep his bat in the lineup at all times, even if it's 2 starts. But I want him starting at first base more than DH because I don't want him to get in his head that when he does get his opportunities to play the field, that he's thinking about if I make a mistake, I might lose this opportunity because he really wants to be a first baseman. You see that he's one of your franchise players, if not your franchise offensive player right now. And if he wants to play first base and he's still above average there, I'm not upsetting him and also potentially messing him up defensively just for the slightest of upgrades that Dominic Smith gives you, especially if Dom continues to struggle offensively. With that said, that is part of our final segment today. We're going to go through the trends that we have seen through this first week in the Mets season. All right, looking through some of the top trends to follow with this Mets team as they have started off with a 5-2 record. Here's the biggest one for me. No doubt about it. There's one thing that stands out above everything else, and you would think it's the starting rotation with the 1.29 ERA because that has been incredible to behold. But I've seen the Mets have good pitching teams in recent years. What I haven't seen is a team that has hit with runners in scoring position. That was the biggest problem last year. That was a problem in 2019 when they were good. And it was also, I think, even a problem at times in 2020, although really the pitching was the issue there. That was a fever dream of a season. So I couldn't really pinpoint all the issues that year. But this season, with runners in scoring position, the New York Mets have 28 RBIs. No other team in the National League has done that up to this point. They are leading the National League in RBIs with runners in scoring position. Now, the Guardians have 38, but I think they had a couple of monster, crazy double-digit scoring games. So that would maybe explain that gaudy number, but that is the team that is leading baseball in RBIs with runners in scoring position. But the Mets, again, second and first in the National League. They're hitting 277 in those spots. Last year, it felt like they hit 077. I'm sure they were better than that, but that's what it felt like. They have 407 on base percentage in these spots, 400 slugging percentage. They're looking great. And honestly, that's even a good thing too. The fact that the slugging percentage isn't higher than 400 just shows to me the Mets aren't trying to do too much. They're getting base hits. They're doing what they have to do. And then you look at the whole team and the individuals that are performing well. Last year, Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo were the only players in the Mets lineup that finished the season with an OPS over 800. I'll say that one more time because it shows you how bad the Mets were. 2 players on the entire team had an OPS over 800. It's not a 900 OPS. I mean, sure, a 900 OPS is unbelievable, but what I'm saying is to not even have anyone over 800, that just shows you how dismal they were last year. So now you have 3 guys, right? This year, so far, very small sample size. Brandon Nimmo over 1,000. Eduardo Escobar over 1,000. Mark Canha 881. Pete Alonso 880. Francisco Lindor 858. Jeff McNeil 855. 6 guys. And the crazy thing is Starling Marte has a 555 OPS. You wouldn't know it because he has just been such a key contributor with his athleticism that it's surprising. He's also been clutch too, has 5 RBIs, has scored 4 runs. He has been productive despite the fact that he's still not hitting up to his standard. You look at Francisco Lindor and Jeff McNeil. Both have on-base percentages right now at 400. That's really great. They are showing us signs that they are the players that they showed to be before the down year last year. And I think that is an incredible um, revelation for this team. For that double play combination to be hitting this well, I think they look great together defensively at the middle. On top of that, so this is a team that is just so much stronger up the middle in every single way. Really, the only 2 batters that are struggling right now that are getting a good amount of at bats is Robinson Cano and Dominic Smith. They're kind of holding this team back a bit, and that is putting you in this position where you're trying to figure out what to do with that DH spot, and no one has really grabbed it just yet. And that is leaving an open door for a Mark Vientos, if he were to get hot, to grab a job in a month or 2. Or even, hell, the way Alvarez is hitting, I'm not counting anything out with him this year. But the Mets offense just looks night and day compared to what it was last year. You go to the pitching. As I already mentioned, the starting rotation, 1.29 ERA. Not much else to really talk about there. Tyler McGill, standout performer up to this point, has not allowed a run in 10 1/3. But Chris Bassett would be right there with him. He just hasn't got his second start yet. He will start Friday's game, and I wouldn't be surprised if he put up zeros in that start as well. And then you have Max Scherzer, who hasn't even hit his peak yet with what we know he can do as a Cy Young type pitcher, yet he has 2 wins. Then you got Carlos Carrasco, David Peterson, and Taijuan Walker, and obviously Walker got hurt, but in the limited time we saw him, he looked great. And those 2 guys, Carrasco and Peterson, look great. So the starting rotation could be a bedrock of this team, and they might have to be considering the way the bullpen has looked. 4.15 ERA, but you remove David Peterson from that because he gave them 4 scoreless out of the pen, and it's a 4.91 ERA. So that tells you a little bit more about what we've seen, particularly over the last 4 games here as this bullpen has struggled. Joely Rodriguez, that is looking like a terrible trade by Billy Epler. I hate to say it. I hate to harp on it. It's been a couple of bad outings, but it's trending in the wrong direction when Miguel Castro is pitching well for the Yankees. He has a 15.43 ERA right now. Sean Reed-Foley, 10.80. I wouldn't be worried about that because he wouldn't be on this team if they had a 26-man roster. So I wouldn't draw too much from that, but he has struggled. Trevor May, an ERA of 9, gave up a home run to Juan Soto, though, and then he walked a batter that came around to score after he had got hurt. So I'm not worried about May just yet. Seth Lugo had 1 rough outing, but I think it's 3 positive outings and 1 down one at this point. So Seth Lugo, I wouldn't be worried about just yet. But when I break down this Mets bullpen as a whole, there's 3 different classes: the arms you trust, the arms you mostly trust, and the arms you just do not trust at all. Right now, the arms I trust implicitly: Edwin Diaz and Drew Smith. Seth Lugo, step behind that, and mostly trust with Trevor May, Adam Ottavino as well, and Chasen Shreve. And anyone who has listened to the show for a while knows that I was tempted to throw Shreve in there as the arms I trust, but as a collective, I don't think everyone is trusting Chasen Shreve the way I trust Chasen Shreve, and I trust Chasen Shreve with my life. When it comes to who I don't trust at all in this bullpen, who do you think? Certain left-hander reliever that probably shouldn't be on this team. We'll see. That's Joely Rodriguez. Sean Reed-Foley, but again, likely a cut once they drop the rosters down. And then Trevor Williams, I put on the don't trust list, but that is in high leverage situations. I trust him in his role, which is to be the mop-up man, the long reliever, or a guy that when you have a 4-run lead might be able to get you 2-3 innings if your starter gets knocked out in the 4th or the 5th inning. Someone can keep you in a game or hold a bigger lead. I just don't think he's going to be pitching in 1-run, 2-run situations unless it's the last game of a series against the Nationals when you are trying to prepare for a series against the Phillies. And with that said, if we look back to that game they dropped on Sunday, When it was all said and done, Buck Showalter's team got the job done and won this series. And so to me, that vindicates all the decisions he made. I will say it one last time this week, and I'm not going to repeat it again because there's no game being played on Thursday. And so we won't have any overreactions until next week from the fans. I will not nitpick a managerial decision in April, at least when it comes to managing the bullpen. Now, our final show of the week for Friday, we have a Friday farm report. I will catch you up on everything going on in the minor leagues with the Mets top prospects with my guy, Jordan Grossman, who, of course, does social media for us at Locked On Mets. We will also preview the upcoming series against the Arizona Diamondbacks. So make sure you tune into that tomorrow. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. And as I just mentioned, follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.